Chapter 13 of The Adventures of a Nature Guide by Enos Mills. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. We live for the most part in a very iron mask of forms. Our daily ways are at bottom so joyless, so trite, so compulsory, that we must be free and simple sometimes, or we break. Our present world is a world of remarkable civilization and of very superior virtue, but it is not very natural and not very happy. We need to draw sometimes great draughts of simplicity and beauty. We need sometimes that poetry should not be droned into our ears, but flashed into our senses. And man, with all his knowledge and his pride, needs sometimes to know nothing and to feel nothing but that he is a marvelous atom in a marvelous world. Frederick Harrison. Chapter 13. Play and Pranks of Wild Folk. The plays of wild folk are delightful exhibitions, and may frequently be enjoyed by those who wait in the wilderness without a gun. Knowing that wild folk play and that they have a home territory brings them strangely close to ourselves. Life in the wild places is not all struggle, not all hunger, fright, and fighting. All wild animals find time to rest, and all from time to time give themselves up to play. They mostly play in silence, but a few play noisily. The majority join with others to frolic, but a number of species play singly. Teamwork has an important play in the life of many bird and animal species, and play appears vital to them all. A tumbleweed in a Wyoming windstorm furnished the plaything in an exciting game for a pack of wolves. I watched the play from the shelter of a ravine. Flying before the wind, the tumbleweed bounded a ridge with a huge wolf leaping after it. Closely pressing him came a pursuing pack of 20. A lull in the wind, and the tumbleweed, colliding with the leading wolf's head, bounded off to one side. Other wolves sprang in the air after it, but the wind carried the tumbleweed along, and the entire pack rushed in pursuit. This big, much-branched, ball-shaped weed was 2 feet in diameter. When it touched the earth, the gale swept it, bounding forward and rolling over and over across the brown, wide plains. After it came the closely massed wolves. Just as those in the lead were nearing this animated plaything, it was caught by a whirlwind and pulled high into the air. 2 wolves leaped and tried to seize it. Several sat down and stared after it, as though it were gone forever. The tumbleweed commenced to descend, but buoyed up by the air, it came down slowly. The pack surged this way and that, as the weed surged in descending to be beneath it, and while it was still several feet above them, a high-leaping fellow struck it head-on and sent it flying to one side. It disappeared in a hollow, and the wolves vanished after it. Puffs of dust and occasionally the high-bounding weed itself told me that the game was on as vigorously as ever. The next act opened with the reappearance of one of the wolves, running up a slope and looking back over his shoulder. Up in the wind, a little behind him and off to one side, came the tumbleweed. The wolf turned, leaped at the weed, struck it with his breast, and knocked it vaulting away. The pack, rushing into view, swerved as one to seize or strike it. Each player was intense, and all were serious as football players. A sweeping gale carried the whirling weed forward again. It came in contact with a rock outcrop and rolled to one side. The whole team rushed at the weed and tumbled pell-mell about it. In this general mix-up, 2 of the wolves started a fight. The pack joined in the row, struggling and rolling about. A pair occasionally clinched, reared into the air, and fell back. The badly mashed tumbleweed with crippling bounces went on with the wind across the wide, dust-blown plains. Suddenly the fight stopped. The panting wolves stood a few seconds, looking at nothing, then scattered. The play was over. Had it started, I wondered, as unceremoniously as suddenly as it stopped? Most wild animal players are as solemn as chess contestants, and most games are as serious as a football match. The characteristic play of the wolf is serious, silent teamwork, but the dignified, independent grizzly plays alone. He too romps in silence, but joyfully. He relaxes and has the time of his life. Bears appear to excel in light-hearted, merry make-believe. A grizzly bear coasting on a steep mountainside made a picturesque play spectacle. He was playing on a summit slope south of Long's Peak, in what is now the Rocky Mountain National Park. As he sat down in the snow, put his forepaws on his knees, and jingled himself along to start, he appeared strangely human. At one point he reached back his paw and put on brakes. He ended the coast with a jump and a somersault. Then, selecting a different place on the slope, he started down again, pushing himself along with both forepaws to get up speed. He ended this time by deliberately rolling over and over. Rising on hind feet, he looked at his marks on the snowy slope and climbed back up for another coast. Twice I have seen a black bear, the happy hooligan of the woods, and a coyote playing together. In one of these games, the bear, solemn looking as an elephant, but as merry as a boy, would allow the coyote to leap over him, but used his speed and his wits in trying to prevent the coyote from ducking under him or leaping across close in front of him. The coyote's play was puppy-like, though suggesting at times fox cleverness. They were well matched, both in skill and speed. They made lively dashes and swift turns as they raced across a grassy opening in the woods. They varied this swift turning by slow passing, biting and striking at each other as they met. Then each in turn enjoyed the ludicrous pretense of being asleep, while the other went through an equally ludicrous pretense of trying to slip up and surprise the sleeper. As games often end, this play broke up in a row. The coyote lost his temper and made a fierce but ineffectual attack on the bear. He finally walked off into the woods, with the bear standing looking regretfully after him. The boy-like black bear would rather play than eat. Once I saw a black bear try repeatedly to get a stupid, lumbering porcupine to play with him. All the way across an opening he made efforts to start a game, but dull Porky lumbered on indifferently. The porcupine is the only animal that I have known which I have never seen play. The black bear will play with bears, or with other animals, or with people, with apparently equal enjoyment. In the Yellowstone I raced and dodged about with several that were nearly wild, to my own entertainment as well as theirs. Bears play less often with objects, but I once watched a make-believe battle which one was having with a stump, and on another occasion I saw an older bear with a cone, striking it about, tossing it into the air, trying to catch it as it fell, and shaking it in his teeth as he rolled about on his back with feet in the air. In most cases neither birds nor animals use playthings, but I have seen birds play with sticks, stones, leaves, and nuts, an otter play with shells, and even using a live turtle for a plaything, and a grizzly playing with a floating log. Rambling through the Medicine Bow Mountains of Colorado one afternoon, I came upon a grizzly bear sitting on his haunches like a dog, and looking with all attention across a beaver pond. Making a quiet detour through the primeval forest, I found that he was watching a number of otter playfully coasting on their slide. The smooth, slippery, wet slide, about 40 feet long, came down the steeply wooded slope into the south shore of the pond. The slide was well worn and testified to the strong play habits of these animals. Each coasting otter ended with a merry splash as he slid into the water. The glimpses that I had of the coasters showed that they were all enjoyment. The grizzly, all the time I watched, was giving the otter enthusiastic attention. But he was only one of many spectators. A flock of wild ducks sat motionless in the pond, observing the players. The coasting suddenly stopped, and the otter disappeared in the water. A squirrel on a spruce limb overhanging the slide had also been a wondering spectator of the play, and with jerky, hesitating chatter of a bark, expressed his disappointment and disapproval because the performance was ended. The characteristic play of coyotes is noisy. They have concerts full of howls, barks, and yelps in ever-varying combinations. These players have regular places for assembling, and both singly and collectively send their wild notes flying at different angles off into the night. There are weird ventriloquial effects which sometimes multiply and reproduce one yapping, yelping entertainer into a scattered number. At other times the howler so transforms his voice that it seems to issue from a point widely separated from the owner. But sometimes this clown of the prairie forgets singing to the stars, and in silence has games and contests which require speed and skill. The humpback whale appears to be the most playful fellow of the seven seas. He plays singly with other whales of all ages, and he will even play with a ship. Off the coast of Alaska a number of humpbacks were at play near the steamer on which I was a passenger. They appeared to have great fun. As speedy and as agile as trout, they threshed about, raced, and countermarched. One literally stood on his head, and with only his tail out of the water, beat and churned the waves violently. Most of all they appeared to enjoy diving, then coming to the surface with all possible speed, shooting 30 or more feet of their ponderous bodies out of the water, and rolling awkwardly to one side as they fell heavily back into the sea. The play of the jays and the crows is often fun at the expense of others. Clark's nutcracker is a rowdy, assailing squirrels and precipitating fights between birds of other species. He is also a daredevil in flying exhibitions and excels in spectacular airplane dips. The long-crested jay is keen-witted and cynical, and it seems natural that in playing he should go the limit in rowdyism and the ridiculous, and indulge in endless pranks. He is strong for vaudeville and farces. He likes to impersonate, to surprise, and to annoy. I once saw a number of jays in an exhibition in which each seemed to be endeavoring to outdo the others. They skipped and jumped, kicked awkwardly, caricatured the pose of a stork, somersaulted, and tried flying from a height with one wing and dropping ungracefully upside down. No end of reckless rowdyism and mockery. Once in the snow on a mountain top I saw a flock of ptarmigan in a strange, energetic, though silent dance. Most birds are quiet in their play. 4 sedate and wise old owls surprised me beyond measure with a play that was mostly ridiculous showing off. They tried to do a few things absurdly impossible for them to do. One of these stunts was chasing their tails, and another was high kicking. But most of their efforts were more in keeping with their ordinary mien. They bowed profoundly, they posed in lordly pairs, they looked to the right and left with a most aristocratic air. They adjusted and readjusted themselves with ceremonious dignity. The energetic beaver gives marked attention to play. Each summer he has a vacation of 3 months or longer. He probably loafs the most of any animal in the wilds. He plays much and often, and is the master of the fine arts of rest. Although I have seen mountain lions only a few times when they were not frightened, Twice I watched them play. On one of these occasions the lion was enjoying the pretense of running down an animal, and carried out a lively pantomime in the snow, frolicking like a kitten. One spring day a flock of bighorn sheep found a large snowdrift across their trail on the summit of Storm Pass. They could easily have gone around it, but evidently saw here what suggested an excuse to frolic. One at a time they started to jump the drift. The first performer, on gaining the further side, turned about to watch the others try it. As each jumper landed, he quickly lined up with those who had preceded him and faced about to watch the performance, while the sheep awaiting their turn also gave their close attention as each jump was made. The style of jump and the distance covered were much alike in each case. Most of the sheep made a standing jump. 2 or 3 backed off several steps and got a running start for the leap. One made a clumsy pretense of slipping and came down in the snow on his side. 2 young lambs went together and instead of jumping far, jumped high, coming down in the center of the drift. After the last one had crossed, the sheep stood together for a few seconds and then strolled on, plainly with nothing in particular to do. One day I saw a number of sheep scrambling and circling on an icy slope. The fun probably was to keep from falling, but it may have been in the falling. Everyone fell a number of times. A few times all 4 feet shot from beneath a sheep at once, and in his sliding a number of rising efforts were made, only to result in the sheep's falling each time before it got on its feet again. Even butterflies play. Climbers on Long's Peak sometimes see them floating up the trough. Often there is an air current flowing up the trough, and sometimes this catches hats and takes them with it. One calm sunny day I looked down over the summit of the peak and saw a procession of butterflies floating or sailing up the trough. On reaching the summit, a majority of them dropped down the vertical south wall of the peak about 400 feet, then flew westward and swung in behind a pinnacle where they re-entered the trough near the bottom. At a point where an upstanding rock in the trough changed the current, there was a lively flapping of wings as though these aviators, like boatmen in rapids, were tensely concentrated. Rarely did a butterfly leave the ranks in ascending, though in coming down the line was more broken. It was a wild region for these fragile winged creatures. The first time that I saw them I long watched and wondered what it was all about. But after seeing similar exhibitions elsewhere, and after watching repeated flights at this place, I concluded that butterflies, as well as other life, play. On perfect days butterflies sail over high moorlands and even cross high mountain tops, but while sailing on the heights they are ever vigilant for wind. The short-lived, unannounced gusts would blow their tender wings to pieces in an instant. If a dash of wind, or sometimes just a cloud shadow comes, they fold wings and drop to the earth. There they lie motionless until all danger is past. Yet these frail, afraid of the wind people seek out a place of their liking to play high up among the crags. I recall once having seen 2 different plays going on side by side. Each was a stirring glimpse of motherhood. A mother bear lay on her side, contentedly watching the cubs as they wrestled, boxed each other, and occasionally mauled her. They were near the summit of the Continental Divide, and all around were scattered snowdrifts and aged, storm-battered pines. On a nearby cliff were a bighorn ewe and 2 lambs. The lambs were leaping over the mother and playing with each other. Each wild mother knew of the other's presence, but was indifferent. With animals, as with ourselves, play appears to be necessary for the development of the young and for the sustained fitness of the mature. As a factor which gives success, it probably ranks with food and sleep. play drills give development and efficiency. Play is the nearest approach to the magic fountain of youth. Distinguished wild folk, those alert and quick to readjust themselves to the ever-changing conditions, those surviving, succeeding, and evolving, are those ever loyal to life's best ally, the youth called play. The wonderful story of evolution shows that playing animals are most likely to survive and leave offspring. Cooperation or teamwork appears to be the outgrowth of team play. This is closely allied to mutual aid, which is a conspicuous factor in evolution, and in mutual aid appears to be the beginning of a conscious consideration for the rights of others. End of chapter 13.